Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids instantly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
All right, hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and you're sitting in for another episode of the That Chapter podcast. You can hear his beautiful laugh in your earbuds right now. He's sitting directly across from me. He's wearing a pink t-shirt that reads "Free Jeffrey Epstein." He's dead.
He gets out.
Shit, I'll have to make another monster. Keith, how are you, my good man? No, Keith is sitting across from me. He's not wearing a Misfits t-shirt.
I'm not,
for once.
No. Yeah, because you called me out in it.
I did, yes, exactly. Deservedly so. And the fans were calling you out in it too. Keith, how are you, buddy?
I am great. I'm doing fantastic.
Excellent. Well, you know what? It's good to hear. Yeah, fans are worried about you.
Oh, well, I'm doing fine, guys.
That's
I'm
good.
Doing fine. Living the dream.
Very good, very good. What's new? You know, Keith, we're getting into the holiday season. I'm hearing jingle bells distantly in my ear.
Oh.
Santa told me what he's getting you, which is coal again.
Yeah.
Are you a Christmas fan, Keith? Do you like Christmas, the Christmas season?
I like the drinking aspect of it. That's always great. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
I think we were talking about it earlier on when because you're going over to the States. You'll be there for.
I'll probably be home by the time. I don't know if I'll be home by the time people hear this or not. I'm heading to the States for a couple of weeks on a vacay, baby.
But we started talking about Thanksgiving, and you were saying it's great being able to just day drink without any guilt.
Exactly.
And I was saying I'm looking forward to doing it for Christmas.
Yeah.
Day drinking all day without any guilt.
Ain't nothing better than cracking open an ice cold beer
First thing in the morning.
First thing, I usually wait till lunch. I don't, I'm not an alcoholic, Keith. So giving himself away yet again.
Just crack it open at like 6:30 and turn around like, oh yeah, my child's in there.
Putting Guinness in your cereal, your cornflakes. Yeah, no, I actually don't like Christmas. I used to like Christmas as a kid. I kind of like, it's kind of just like sucks now.
Yeah, the presents are always fun, but they're kind of gone. Well,
exactly.
It's
I don't even get presents anymore. If I want something, I just buy it when I want it. So I have no point even looking forward to it. I hate having to buy other people's shit.
Yeah,
because I'm shit at buying presents.
I was like that for a while, where I just kind of went off Christmas, but now that I have a child, it's amazing again. It's like it's gone back real magical again, and I get to play Santa Claus at night. And she's always, we have this thing now, the old traditions. And she's like, "What will I leave out?" And I was like, "What do you leave out for Santa?" And she's like, "Oh, a mince pie and a pint of Guinness." I was like, "Yeah, that's it. That's the one."
Keith, Santa's favorite. That's very good. Very good. Okay, well, you know what? So you got your wife and your daughter and the ghost, of course. What are you going to get the ghost for Christmas?
Do you want to hear a ghost story?
Have you got one?
I do.
Okay, the ghost stories are getting creepy again.
Yeah.
As we get into the dark, the hour of the wolf, the spooky nights. So, folks at home will remember a couple of weeks ago, your door was violently shaking.
The door handle.
The door handle was violently shaking.
Yeah, the door itself wasn't really going anywhere. So that's why it wasn't wind. It was the door handle was going up and down.
That's
really
what's
quickly.
weird about, because usually if you press the door handle, you're kind of going to be forcing the door. Like you'll hear a little kind of, it's like
No, the door handle's going up and down.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, that was weird. But this one's really creepy. So do you remember a while back when I was saying that my wife twice now heard me calling her name?
Yes.
And then she came up and she was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I wasn't calling you."
Yeah.
I said, "I definitely heard you calling my name." So I had an experience. So I was in the house and I heard my daughter. And she was kind of, happened really quickly, where it was her kind of playing really loud and then called my name. And then I was like, oh, because I was pottering around the house, I was busy. I was like, oh, what does she need? And I went to go, and then very quickly, I was like, oh my God, my daughter's not in the house.
Whoa.
She was in creche, like.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, she's not here. And then when I kind of realised it stopped. It was just dead silent. But honest to God, I heard her voice. It was her voice. It was definitely my child's voice.
Whoa.
Calling out my name. And beforehand, just that like little bit of playing beforehand.
Yeah.
Very weird.
That
very,
is
very
creepy.
Yeah. And we don't have any kids on either side of us.
Right.
So, like, we live in, like, a terrace house. So, either side of us, there's, like, two old people either side. So, it's not like I hear the child from somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was. It's either a ghost or I'm hearing voices. Either way, it's good.
Both are good for content. I agree with that. Hopefully you are going insane. That's creepy, though. It's like the ghost is, like, mimicking people in your house.
That's it, yeah. So
one day, it's trying to replace you or somebody in your family.
Yeah, could be. Well, no one was in the house at all. It was just me and my own.
Yeah, but it's learning.
Oh, I know what you mean. Okay, it's
You know,
learning.
it's practicing. It's going to be like that. Maybe it's remember we talked about them before, the Irish fairies,
The changelings.
changeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
damn, dude. Maybe that's what it is.
Could be. Maybe there's a fairy in the house. Who knows?
Yeah. Also, as you'll note, Keith said that two old people live on either side of him. Me and Keith have really discussed waiting for them to die, and I will buy one of their houses, and we will knock the walls.
Hey, we're going to knock the attic through. We're going to knock it through. And we're going to make a big podcast studio.
Yeah, in the attic, in Keith's haunted attic.
Yeah. I
So
thought my wife knows yet. Oh, she listens to it.
She'll find out.
You know now.
She'll find out when she gets the sledgehammer. You know, true. She hears the sledgehammer going in directly in the attic. All right. Okay. Mike's movie reviews. I haven't done another one in a while. I truly have been slacking. But see, that's the thing. As I mentioned, I'm going on vacay, baby. So I'm basically just working, podcasts and videos because I like to have, lots of content for a while I'm away. So by the time I'm like finished, like editing my videos or whatever, doing whatever I'm doing, at the end of the day, I'm like pretty tired. So I usually just want to stick on some dumb shit, which halftime lately has been Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen for some reason.
It's classic.
It's all on YouTube and like the whole season up as one video.
Yeah,
It's like an 8-hour video, so I just
okay, that's
keep
good.
putting it on.
Yeah.
Although, my other favorite thing to watch is survival shows. I love survival
they're good,
shows. Yeah.
Do you know what I've been rewatching? Frasier.
Frasier? I've never been a Frasier fan.
Oh, it's so good, man. It's so funny.
Toast salad and scrambled. I literally just that's the only thing I know. But, the dad is cool.
Yeah, he's good. Martin Crane, He's great, yeah.
But no, I never. It just seems like two very weird. They're not. Are they British? Frasier,
No.
him and his brother, but they seem British.
They
They all talk like this.
do have
Frasier,
They do have that pompous, but no, they're from, well, I don't know where he's from initially, but it's set in Seattle.
Yeah.
They're American,
But what? Yeah, they're just very posh people.
yeah, they're really, really posh.
Yeah.
Really posh psychiatrists. But I watched as a kid a lot. I thought it was funny. But now I'm kind of rewatching again as an adult. It's like I have a new appreciation for it.
Oh, right.
Getting all like different jokes that I didn't get before. That's a great show. You gotta watch it. You gotta go. It's very funny. It's really easy watching TV.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, it just. I think it just never appealed to me. All right. So Mike's movie review. We'll do it like we did last time from a movie I haven't seen yet.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick a movie called Hold Your Breath.
Let's see.
Now, I think this is Hold Your Breath. It says Sarah Paulson. It's 1 hour. It's on Disney Plus. It's 1 hour 34. I have no idea. I've never heard of that movie.
Okay.
I think that's the one. She's in American Horror Story. I think that actress, Sarah Paulson.
I don't know.
I think American Horror Story sucks. But my wife watches it. The War Dog.
Right.
She likes it. Shout out to her. She's editing this. So Hold Your Breath. I think that might be the 4th movie in the Don't Breathe franchise. Don't Breathe 2, followed by Don't Move,
Right.
and then Hold Your Breath.
They're getting all the senses. Okay.
So in this one, it's underwater.
Okay, great.
So he's
Now, is this set in a dystopian future where we're
it's
all
set on the
underwater?
same planet as Avatar.
Great,
Which
okay.
is a watery planet. No, wait, is that a watery planet?
I think the second one is. Yeah.
Okay, no, it's not. It's set in Waterworld.
Waterworld,
The future,
okay.
distant future.
Okay, with Kevin Costner. Nice.
Yeah, which
Is he
I
in
don't
it?
know. No.
Okay.
But maybe he has a cameo.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what's the thing? But it's very similar. So, still the same villain, who's the blind guy
Of
with
course.
a big bowl of jizz and a turkey baster.
Of course, yeah.
He's developed eyes, like T-Rex eyes, as we
Yeah.
discussed in the 3rd movie,
Yes.
which we all know happened. I hope, by the way, folks, go edit the Wikipedia synopsis just so it matches up with what I think happened.
Okay.
So he's developed T-Rex eyes.
Yeah.
Then it rained and the icebergs melted
Yeah, okay.
because he became immortal.
Right, of course, yeah.
But
Yep.
because he became immortal by having kids all the time, because he was successful with impregnating women with his turkey baster in the movie we all loved, our favorite movie, Don't Move.
Right.
And then the icebergs melted.
Yeah.
He's still with his turkey baster, but he's underwater.
Okay.
And he's got
He's
the gills,
developed gills? Okay.
like Kevin Costner style
Yes,
gills.
okay.
But it's called Hold Your Breath. Because, you have to hold your breath underwater. And he's still going around with the turkey baster
Nice,
and the
okay.
bowl, but it's under the water.
Right. So he's not holding his breath because he can breathe underwater.
He can breathe
but
underwater,
he's
but
bringing
you
victims
have to.
down.
Exactly.
and they
Well,
have to
you
hold
have to
their
escape.
breath.
You're swimming away from him.
Got it, okay.
It's a swimming movie.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got flippers and he's coming after you with a turkey baster, and then you're just like trying to get away, and you have to hold your breath, obviously, underwater.
Of course, yeah.
You could go above the water and not hold your breath, but you're not allowed.
But then Jaws comes in.
Yeah, exactly. But then flying animals appear. He can also fly now too. So
Oh, buddy, this is a multiverse movie.
Exactly.
We're bringing in all everything I can think of.
exactly. So I'm pretty sure that's what happened in Hold Your Breath.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds better than whatever the plot of the actual movie is going to be about.
How many stars would you give it?
2 stars.
Okay.
Though, not enough turkey baster. I would give Don't Move 5 stars.
Right, okay, yeah.
That one sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. That's Mike's movie review. Okay, Keith, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the hi-fi murders.
Yes, we are. This is a true crime Maroney set in the 70s. This case is Whoa Boy. This is dark. Torture for the sake of torture, I would say, is the only way to describe this one.
Yeah.
Very, very sinister and very sick. So look forward to that, I guess. But yeah, it's a really wild story. So let's give it a go, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's just get straight into it, folks. It all begins April 22nd, 1974, when 20-year-old Stanley Walker and 19-year-old Michelle Ansley were going through the usual motions as they went through every time they closed up the Hi-Fi store in Ogden, Utah, a city which, back then in 1974, had about 69,000 people living in it. Nice. Neither of them, however, had any idea that in just a few minutes, they'd be longing to go back to their regular, mundane routine. As they were about to lock up for the night, the 2 young workers were confronted by 4 men armed with pistols. The 4 intruders bound Stanley and Michelle's hands and feet before forcing them down into the store's basement. These 4 men, they were essentially there to rob the joint. In the 70s, hi-fi equipment would have been extremely expensive. Right?
It's still pretty expensive.
It's touche, my good friend. Yeah, I bought a soundbar. It's like, it was expensive enough.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. I was shocked. I mean, I still bought it, but I was shocked.
You need that good soundbar for a Don't Breathe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I gotta hear. Gotta hear him swinging up after. Or wait, no, that's, wait, I've forgotten which movie's which.
I've got lost in my own life.
Exactly, yeah. So anyway, these 4 guys were there to rob the place. They were armed with pistols, so you knew they mean business. So they forced both Stanley and Michelle down into the basement so they could load the valuable merchandise into the 2 vans that were waiting outside. The 2 captive workers had no idea what was happening and could only hope that the men would quickly take what they could and then leave. It might mean an uncomfortable few hours tied up on the basement floor, but that beat the alternatives that were racing through Stanley and Michelle's minds. Now, I'm sure some of you guys know that this wasn't the case, and if it was just a simple robbery of a hi-fi store, then I wouldn't be talking to you about it now. What should have cost the store owner a lot of inconvenience and dozens of calls back and forth with an insurance company you were desperate not to pay out, as well as the considerable amount of crisis counseling for the 2 young adults who'd essentially become hostages, well, instead, this entire case would cost 6 people their lives, drastically changing the course of dozens more, and ultimately this entire story went down in history as one of the most notorious crimes in Utah's history. Shit got real this night.
I worked in retail before, and there was a brief moment where I thought we were being robbed.
Really?
Yeah, I was in the back, so we were cashing up for the night, and the shutter was down most of the way. There was like a foot left underneath it, and I was in the back just counting the cash, and I was on my own, and then I came out, and there was a guy standing in the middle of the floor, and I was like, oh shit. There was a moment where I was like, we're getting robbed.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, are you guys closed? It's like, he crawled
under...
He crawled
under the shutter.
I was like,
are you guys still open?
Are you still open?
What the fuck?
I know, idiot.
Man, I hate working retail. I know, I'd always get that as well. Like, we close at 6 p.m., but usually like 5 to 6, 10 to 6. You start turning off the music, you lock up the door. Usually one person might stand by the door to stop letting new customers in because we're trying to have to clean up the place, whatever. But there'd always be some person at like 1 minute to 6 or 5 minutes past 6, like rattling the door, like, let me in. And then they'd be like, no, we're closed. Oh, please. Fuck off. I have to go home. I have a life too. I hated that shit.
Or when they just get in, they go, oh, I just made it. It's like, no, you didn't just make it.
Exactly. No,
you
we're closed.
Ruined my evening.
The previous 10 minutes before we close, it's like, that's my time. Yeah.
But anyway, back to this story. It really was a crime that shook Utah. So this year actually marks the 50th anniversary of this tragedy. So I came across several recent articles featuring interviews with people who were involved in the case back then. One was a retired member of law enforcement, and he was reflecting on his 4-decade career. And despite everything he encountered, this case still stands out as the worst he ever saw.
Wow.
After all, this was a crime unlike anything the community had ever seen, leading to widespread fear. Many residents, they were feeling deeply vulnerable, and murders, they were just seemed really random and shockingly brutal, as we're going to get into. So this really caused this heightened tensions within the community, and it took years to repair.
Yeah, folks, you will see why. So as the robbers were busy doing their thing, Stanley Walker's friend, 16-year-old Byron Courtney Naisbitt, who went by his middle name Courtney, he arrived at the store, just to chat with his buddy Stanley, who would normally be clocking off by now. Just literally walking by, how's my buddy doing? He'll be off work now himself soon. But instead, Courtney was met by a man he didn't recognize, holding a semi-automatic pistol to his face. Before the teenager could even begin to process what was happening, he too was being bound and bundled down the basement stairs to join a terrified Stanley and terrified Michelle. Courtney had seen the store lights were still on and had dropped in to thank Stanley for letting him park his car in the store's lot while he was sorting something out next door. Literally like the wrong place, worst time possible. Just the worst time to pop in on your friend.
Oh, it was
He's being held hostage.
Completely wrong place, wrong time for Courtney. But even for Michelle, apparently she hadn't been on the schedule for that afternoon. Someone asked to swap shifts with her, and she accepted it. I think she was new at work.
She was only there a week, at the time.
So she was like, yeah, of course, I'll work it. And so she wasn't meant to be there, and then unfortunately, she was.
So when Stanley hadn't returned home for dinner, as expected, his father, 43-year-old Orrin Walker, became concerned. It wasn't like his son to not contact home if he was going to be late, and this was the 1970s, so sending a text wasn't an option. So Orrin jumped in his car and drove down to the hi-fi store. Seconds after walking through the door, he himself was tied up next to his son and the other two captives. With the basement's population swelling quickly, the robbers were beginning to panic. The situation was at risk of spiraling out of their control. Just like this story is whack. Just like Stanley's father, Orrin, Courtney's mother, she herself had started to become concerned when he hadn't returned home. And then she entered the store looking for her son. Then 52-year-old Carol Naisbitt became the fifth and final captive to be bound and gagged in the store's basement. It's literally crazy. They're trying to rob the store and people just keep coming in looking for the people they are holding hostage. They started with 2 hostages. They ended up with 5.
I know, this gets so bad. It gets much worse. But so far, it's kind of playing out like a Monty Python or SNL skit.
I know. It starts off like a comedy. Like you imagine just like they're robbers. The thieves are just like, fuck's sake, you know the person. All right. But unfortunately, it starts off comedy, goes to tragedy.
Big time.
So in all, the men stole more than $24,000 worth of electrical goods from the store. The 5 victims would be left lying there for almost 3 hours until they were finally discovered by Orrin Walker's wife, Stanley Walker's mother, and her other son. She'd grown increasingly concerned, having not heard from her husband for several hours after he had gone out to find their son. Nothing could have prepared her for the scene she found at the store. Her son, Stanley Walker, already dead. So too was 19-year-old Michelle Ansley. Carol and Courtney Naisbitt were only hanging onto their lives by a thread. Her husband, Orrin, was alive, but in seriously bad shape. Emergency services arrived swiftly. Carol Naisbitt passed away shortly after arriving at St. Benedict's Hospital. The intense level of torture Courtney had been subjected to had left him unconscious, and doctors weren't sure if he'd ever wake up. That meant that Orrin Walker was the only one who'd be able to give his own recollection of what had happened after he had arrived, with the abundant physical evidence filling in the gaps in the hi-fi robbery.
God, like all that for like 24 grand.
Yeah, that's it. All for some stereos. Like,
and then
what
it's
the fuck?
like even 24 grand, then it's split between 4 people.
Yeah.
So they get like 6 grand each for murdering and like torturing like innocent people.
Yeah, it's insane.
Horrific.
What happened was this. So the victims were joined together in the basement by their captors, and could hear 2 of them discussing getting something from one of the getaway vans. Eventually, one of the robbers was sent out to the vans, only to return a few minutes later with a bottle in a brown paper bag. One of the hostage takers partially freed Orrin Walker from his restraints, while another poured a glass of the bluish-green liquid from the mystery bottle, before ordering Orrin to give the liquid to the other prisoners. Only Orrin threw a spanner in the works and flat out refused to help the men in any way. The robbers bound Orrin again and decided that they were just going to do it themselves. They lined up their 5 victims, 5 hostages, against a wall, and one of the men told them that the liquid was vodka laced with sleeping pills, and that their intention was for the cocktail, to, as harmlessly as possible, knock out all the hostages so that the men could make their escape, steal all the stereo equipment, directly above them, and escape before they woke up and alerted the authorities.
Good on Aaron for not helping. Like,
Yeah.
realistically, they didn't really need Aaron's help
Yeah.
in the first place. So, like, asking him to do this just seems like a bit of a power play.
Yeah.
Which he just turned around and goes, oh, fuck you. I'm not doing that. I'm not helping. Fair play to him.
Yeah. I mean, they had guns, so it's pretty, like brave, you know?
Yeah.
With little choice but to obey their captors and just hope that the mixture really was what they said it was, they took it. And over the next couple of hours, the 5 victims would be subjected to some of the most abhorrent actions imaginable. And it was all done with such callousness and complete lack of regard for human suffering that, honestly, you find it unlikely that this was the first time the perpetrators had done anything like it. See, the moment the liquid touched the hostages' lips, it was clear it wasn't the cocktail they were told it was. This ain't vodka. Whatever it was caused an immediate and severe reaction. Burns causing their skin to blister and form oozing lesions upon contact. Oren had previously worked with chemicals and had already correctly guessed that whatever the liquid was, it wasn't vodka and sleeping pills, but rather it was some kind of corrosive, some kind of acid. His best guess was that it was most likely hydrochloric acid, given the immediate and nasty effect it was having on the other victims. Like, damn, they were forcing people to drink literal acid.
I know, it's horrendous.
Oh, man, that is so horrific.
And then even like, because like the first person would have taken it, and then like the second person has to take it looking at what it's going to do to them.
Oh, my God. Oren said that Michelle Ansley had still been begging the men to spare her throughout the ordeal. The men ignored her pleas, forced her to drink the liquid, and even tried to use duct tape to keep the victims' mouths shut, with the corrosive still inside. But because of the burn damage to their skin, the duct tape would no longer stick to their mouths. Oh, man.
God, it's horrific.
Not being able to tape their mouths shut meant that the victims were free to scream and cry out in agony, which just infuriated their captors even more.
Yeah, I can only imagine what kind of pain they were. Like, this would have, like, without, like the burns on the mouth, but it would have been burning their, like, holes in their esophagus and way down, and also their stomach, and God, it would be unimaginable.
Yeah. Oren knew that whatever it was going to cause irreparable damage if he, too, drank it. At first, he spat it out, but that just made the men beat him and demand he drink it. In the end, Oren took it in his mouth and pretended to swallow, but actually let it run out of the sides of his mouth. Pain from that was still excruciating, but not as severe as the others. Looking around, he saw the effect it was having on the others, so Oren mimicked as best as he could the screams and convulsions of his son and others. And yeah, like, Oren was his son.
He had to watch this whole time.
Yeah.
It was at this point, like, as if to, like, add further insult to injury. So while these 5 people were lying on the ground, screaming, coughing, just struggling to breathe, the men decided now was the best time to rob them. So they took their watches and their jewellery, all while they were, like, lying and writhing on the ground.
Man, it's just like the most depraved, despicable pieces of shit. As their 5 victims lay in agony, still bound on the basement floor, the men seemed to grow angrier and angrier with every second. It was almost as if they had expected the drink to have been far cleaner, and they thought it would work much faster, and couldn't understand why it was taking so long and why it was so messy. Whatever the reason, it was clear the robbers' patience had run out. One of the men finally snapped, and after drawing his pistol from his waistband, he took Carol and Courtney Naisbitt and in turn shot each of them in the back of the head. Carol was out almost right away. Courtney, though critically injured, survived the shot. The men also fired at Oren, but missed. Oren, though, he remained still, and despite being in constant intense pain from the burns to his face and mouth, he managed to keep quiet, convincing the shooter that he must have hit him and killed him. Oren heard the man tell his accomplice to go upstairs and come back in half an hour. The second man made no argument and seemed unfazed by his friend's murderous actions and the potential horrors that were to come. When his friend left, the shooter then took Michelle Ainsley to a separate corner of the basement, a few meters away from the others. At gunpoint, he ordered her to remove her clothes and, well, you can probably guess what happened next. So, after having to remain still and hear the man assaulting the 19-year-old girl multiple times, Oren heard Michelle Ansley's final plea to her captor and rapist. She told him, "Please, I'm too young to die." Ignoring the innocent girl's begging, the man dragged her, still naked, back to the other victims, and after pushing her face first to the ground, shot her once in the back of the head. This is so dark.
It is so dark. After she was raped, but before she was shot, her captor took her into the bathroom and ordered her to use the toilet while he watched. And I've no idea why he did this. At first, I thought it might have been like something to get rid of DNA evidence or something, but then I remembered it was the 70s, and DNA wasn't really a thing in forensic science yet, so I don't know, I guess we can just add like creep to the footnote of this sadistic piece of shit.
Yeah. The other man returned from upstairs, and the two went to check on their victims, and they realized that Oren was still alive. The shooter knelt on Oren's chest and attempted to strangle him with a wire. Unfortunately, it's not like the movies and strangling someone. Even with the assist of a makeshift ligature, it's really fucking hard. Since it was taking too long, and the two men had already showed their distinct lack of patience, the shooter gave up on strangulation after a while, released his grip, and Oren began coughing and spluttering. Just when you think this story can't get any darker, it continues to get darker. This story is crazy. The second man then inserted a pen into Oren's ear, and the two men began stamping on it, which broke the pen and forced it through Oren's eardrum and out of his throat.
Jesus.
How could I don't even know how a pen can do that. Go through your ear and out your neck.
Yeah, and it wasn't just one quick stamp. He
they were
stood a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah. It should have as killed him. They probably thought it was going to go into his brain or whatever. And it was basically by the miracle, the slimmest odds that he wasn't dead. It was enough to convince the men, though, that they'd done enough. They certainly have fucking done enough. And with their goods loaded up, all 24,000 of their dollars, basically, and the victims dealt with, they finally withdrew and left in a getaway van waiting outside. 3 hours later, they were discovered by the family members, the other walkers who'd come looking for them. Officers Bokut and Youngberg from the Ogden Police Department were the first to respond to the call, arriving at 2323 Washington Boulevard shortly after 10 p.m. All they knew was that there had been some unknown trouble at the store, according to the dispatcher.
Unknown trouble doesn't really create that sense of urgency.
Yeah, exactly, for how serious this was. They were met in the car park by Stanley Walker's hysterical mother, who just kept repeating, "They've been shot," over and over again. Oren's other son broke down the door and checked on everyone, while his mother called the police and EMS. Every officer on and off duty that could be called in was called in to help. Only Oren and 16-year-old Courtney Naisbitt survived, though their lives were changed forever. Courtney was in such a bad state that he wasn't expected to survive. It took 266 days in hospital, many of them in intensive care, before he could be released. Even then, he would never lead a normal life. He had severe brain damage, along with amnesia, meant that he wouldn't be able to testify in any potential trial. Fortunately, despite his own injuries requiring extensive surgery and a prolonged recovery, Oren Walker, however, was not only going to be able to testify, even after taking a pen through the head, he was able to give the police a detailed description of both men responsible and their actions that night. Oren described the man who'd pulled the trigger as a short black male wearing glasses who spoke in what sounded like a Caribbean accent. The other man was also African American but taller and a bigger built. He was also able to describe one of the vans being driven by a third man as being a yellow or possibly a cream-colored van. Oren Walker also noted that there may have been as many as 3 more men along with those he could describe clearly.
It's crazy when the police, when they first arrived at the scene, Oren, he was actually up and about and he was walking around. Like, he was clearly in shock, but he was looking for something to cut his son's restraints, not realizing that his son was already dead.
Oh, man.
So when officers explained that there was nothing that they could do for his son, one of them had noticed what he thought was a pen behind Oren's ear. But it was only later, while talking to him in better lighting, that they realised that the pen had actually gone through his ear and out his neck, moving slightly when he was speaking. So he's just, like, you have to be in some sort of shock for that. Like.
Yeah. The investigators knew right from the off that the robbery had been well planned out. The level of violence, though, was so needless that it left even the most veteran officers, completely in shock. On Tuesday, April 23rd, the investigation caught a huge break when 2 teenage boys, whose parents lived on an Air Force base, they'd been out dumpster diving, stumbling across wallets and other possessions belonging to the victims of the, at this stage, well-publicized hi-fi store murders. The 2 boys dumpster diving recognized one of the victims in their driver's license photo and called in their discovery to police, and they recovered the items, later confirming them to belong to the victims. All of these items had been tossed into a dumpster on the grounds of Hill Air Force Base. Hill Base is in Davis County, Utah, just a short drive south of Ogden. In a very forward-thinking piece of proactive police work, the detective sent out to retrieve the victim's items, Detective Deloy White, realized that the news of the discovery had already spread around the base, and dozens of airmen and other Air Force crew had begun watching the police activity. So, in hopes of drawing a reaction from anyone with potential knowledge of the crimes, the detective decided to make a show of taking out each item and parading it in front of the onlookers before each item was sealed into an evidence bag. All the while, he was keeping a careful eye, fixed firmly on the crowd to spot any noticeable reactions.
Kind of reminds me of what they used to do in Paris in the 1800s. So they had these morgues which were basically open to the public.
Oh, yeah.
But when they'd find like a body that was like unclaimed, the police, if they kind of felt that there was a perpetrator involved in it, they would like bring the perpetrator to it and kind of strut him in front of the bodies.
Yeah.
And just look for a reaction to see what they think. But the crowds they used to gather at those morgues was crazy, and it was like live theater for the morbid,
right?
And if they got these like detectives coming in, they might they'll see a couple of dead bodies, and they might get a show. Some might get arrested. Like, what are they?
Yeah, the things you did before TV. Didn't we talk? That was in a previous episode we talked about this. I remember you telling me about that before.
We mentioned it before. I can't remember which episode it was, but we definitely mentioned. I definitely mentioned it before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we just recently hit 100 episodes on the podcast, so congratulations. We've talked about a lot of stories.
We have.
yeah. So, the gamble paid off as the detective spotted two airmen in uniform who seemed panicked and grew more and more restless as further items were being pulled from the dumpster. The two suspect men seemed like they were pacing up and down rather furiously, and at times seemed to engage one another in a series of heated exchanges. The men also matched Orrin Walker's description of the robbers and killers. Detective White knew he'd touched a nerve. He just didn't know why yet, but he made sure to get the names of the airmen in question to call in for a bit of a chin wag. The two men in question were Dale Pierre and William Andrews, two names that had already been raised in relation to the investigation. Just hours after news of the crime had broken, an Air Force officer had called in a tip in which he mentioned both Pierre and Andrews' names, along with that of a third airman named Keith Roberts.
Keith.
According to the tip, the men had previously been heard bragging of their intention to rob, someday, quote, the hi-fi store in Ogden. Needless to say, no one had taken them seriously until seeing news of the robbery later on. I mean, they were heard bragging, hey, we should rob that hi-fi store in Ogden. It was robbed. And then, they should have been, questioned already.
It seems like it's a pretty specific thing to ignore.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to rob that do you know the hi-fi store? The one down on Washington Boulevard?
Yeah.
I'm going to rob that someday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, it robbed. Man, they were just joking. The tip, along with Detective White's own instincts, were enough for a judge to grant a search warrant for the men's barracks at Hill Base. But, as it turned out, they wouldn't need to apply for the warrant. The base commanders were happy to let the police in. If the men were innocent, they wanted their names cleared. If they were guilty, they wanted them out of the Air Force. The search findings were pretty much damning for them. The first major finding was a big discovery that wasn't immediately obvious to police, and its importance was only revealed much later. But when it was, it would be the one piece of evidence that sealed the men's fates. It was a poster for the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry Callahan movie, Magnum Force.
Nothing wrong with shooting, as long as the right people get shot.
Hell yeah. Magnum Force had only come out the year earlier, and was the second film to feature Eastwood's iconic detective character, and the first sequel to 1971's Dirty Harry. Ironically, rather than identifying with the movie's hero cop, I suppose kind of anti-hero cop, he's a badass.
He's pretty badass, yeah.
He's pretty badass.
He's badass.
The hi-fi store robbers instead thought that the movie's bad guy was much cooler. A serial killer who in one scene is shown forcing a sex worker to drink Drano, which kills her immediately. That's how it works.
Yeah.
It works exactly like the movies.
I watched the scene in the movie. It's literally like 10-15 seconds.
Oh, really?
And she's dead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because that's what they thought they would do. They decided Drano would be the perfect execution method for anybody who got in their way. After all, in the movie, it only takes a couple of seconds.
Movies don't like.
Yeah, of course not. In later interviews, it was revealed that the movie had been shown on base, and the three men who ended up facing charges in the case had watched the movie multiple times. The second piece of the puzzle was a couple of pieces of paper. Hidden underneath the carpet was a receipt for a storage unit where, on Wednesday, April 24th, police would find the tens of thousands of dollars worth of stolen goods. Using serial numbers, detectives were able to prove that the goods were the same ones taken from the hi-fi store during the robbery, and the men's fate was sealed. Just to add some sugar into an already sweet dish, officers also found several items belonging to a Brent Richardson, who was the owner of the hi-fi store. He wasn't there when it was robbed, but he owned it. Along with the receipt of a handwritten list, the hi-fi store in Ogden was top of the list. Inclease was the next store that was on the list. Each were stores that carried high-value goods. Basically, it was a hit list of stores they wanted to rob, and the hi-fi store was the first one. They also came across some more circumstantial evidence like rubber gloves and even the cellophane wrappers belonging to records from the hi-fi store. The final piece of evidence was a plastic bottle containing the mystery fluid that had been forced down the victims' throats and caused the agonizing burns that had plagued the victims' last minutes alive. It was nothing more than store-bought bottle of Drano brand sink unblocker. The discovery of the Drano not only meant the Magnum Force poster became vital, it also meant that the hospital staff treating Orrin Walker and Courtney Naisbitt could finally do so properly, as they knew now what they were actually dealing with.
That Drano stuff, it's no joke. I think it's mostly like lye, but when mixed with water, the chemical reaction just like generates this intense heat, which helps dissolve like grease, hair, and other literal shit that clogs pipes. So it's literally designed to break down organic matter. So I can only imagine what this was doing like to the victim's insides as it was going down. It was literally, he's like, great, I'll dissolve all this.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
All throughout their investigation, detectives involved with the case strongly believed there to have been 3 more men in addition to Andrews, Pierre, and Keith Roberts. Roberts was linked to the crime through interviews conducted on base, and eventually investigators were able to tie him to the crime as the driver of one of the 2 vans used by the gang. Though they had their suspicions about who the other 3 men were, there was never enough evidence to bring charges against them. So now about the 3 men in question. First off, Dale Pierre. He was 21 years old when he planned and carried out the robbery with his pals. Aged 17, Dale Pierre moved from Trinidad and Tobago to Brooklyn, New York, and Pierre was by far the most violent of the group, being named as the trigger man by the only survivor, as well as his accomplices, and he was the rapist too. In a shock to no one at all, Pierre had also already been named as the prime suspect in an unrelated murder case. Really, the only shocking part is that he was only suspected in 1 murder before the hi-fi store robbery. It's safe to say that someone with his pathology, that is to say an irredeemable psychopath, if Dale Pierre hadn't been arrested after the robbery murders, he would have killed again and probably again. Instead of becoming a serial killer, he'd have to settle for mass murder instead. At the time of the murders, Pierre was living in barracks next to the dumpster where the wallets belonging to some of the victims were found. Pierre had enlisted in the US Air Force in May 1973, and after less than 4 months beginning active duty as a helicopter mechanic, Pierre was transferred to Hill Air Force Base in Utah. Soon after he arrived, Pierre was interviewed and came very close to being charged in the murder of Air Force Sergeant Edward Jefferson. Edward and Dale had been pals, and on Sunday, October 1st, 1973, shortly after Dale, arrived in Utah, this was 6 months before the hi-fi murders, Dale had been at Edward Jefferson's apartment playing some tunes. Good old waka waka. When Edward discovered that his car and apartment keys were missing. He goes, what the hell, where's my keys? They searched high and low, but couldn't find the keys, but they miraculously turned up the following day. It appeared that Dale Pierre had stolen the keys and had had them duplicated. Then Dale returned to Edward Jefferson's apartment the next day to help him continue searching for his keys, and then that's when they just magically reappeared. Edward, however, immediately became suspicious of Dale and changed the locks to his apartment and also changed his car ignition. Dale, of course, he would deny everything, saying, I never stole your keys. And then a couple of days later, Edward Jefferson was murdered in his apartment with a bayonet.
He was actually interrogated twice for that murder. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence linking Pierre to the murder, but unfortunately there was no direct evidence. But Pierre, he was a piece of work. While he was in county jail for the hi-fi murders, a few instances showed what kind of character he was. On one occasion, he threw a supper tray at a guard when the guard had served him a fried chicken drumstick instead of a wing, which Pierre requested. How could you?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Pierre, he had also tried to sue the sheriff for $300,000 for not allowing him to take his afternoon nap. So clearly this guy, he wasn't right in the head.
Yeah.
And his defense team, they did get a prominent psychiatrist to see if he actually was legally insane. And here's what the psychiatrist had to say about Pierre. I think it's probably the most gruesome crime that's ever occurred in this state, in my memory. Although I've heard some pretty bad ones, I think this is the worst. The sadistic quality here, the unmitigated and unnecessary cruelty, the ingenuity and variety of indignities to the people, I think it's the worst. So Pierre, he did go on to tell a psychiatrist that he was injured in a motorcycle accident at age 15 where he suffered a head injury that required 25 stitches. So because of this, Pierre, he was taken through tests to see if he had any brain damage. But the psychiatrist noted that he felt Pierre was conning them with the mistakes that he was making, the purposeful mistakes.
Yeah.
So in the end, it was ruled that he was definitely legally sane.
Yeah,
Just
for
a
sure.
Psychotic sadist.
Yeah, just a piece of shit. Another one of the hi-fi killers was 19-year-old William Andrews, who he was born in Jonesboro, Louisiana, and moved to Hill Air Force Base from Dallas. He was also a helicopter mechanic. Though William didn't himself, pull the trigger or directly kill any of the victims, he did admit to helping to forcefully pour the Drano down their throats, an action that he believed that would kill them instantly. William fought his sentence harder than anyone else involved. During the investigation, William's blue van was identified as being at the scene of the crime, parked outside the hi-fi store during the time of the murders. The van was searched and found to have drain cleaner spilt on the floor. William Andrews repeatedly denied ever intending or planning to kill anyone, yet the mountain of physical evidence and witness reports strongly refuted his claims and attempts to land the blame at Dale Pierre's feet. During the trial, William was named as the instigator of the entire hi-fi store robbery. And finally, Keith Roberts. Like William Andrews, Keith Roberts was also only 19 years old at the time of the crime. Originally from Lawton, Oklahoma, Keith Roberts was the only one of the three charged that had a family of their own. Keith was married with an infant son at the time. Right up to the trial, he denied being involved, but finally admitted being the getaway driver once he took the stand. He insisted that he never left the van, despite being seen by a witness reportedly pacing back and forth outside the store at the time of the robbery. Still, Keith did not enter the store and did not partake in the torture or the murder. Until the news of the robbery and the murders broke, Keith Roberts didn't even know that anybody had been killed, during the robbery while he was outside. All three men were charged. William Andrews, Dale Pierre, and Keith Roberts all were tried together for first-degree murder and robbery. Owing to the massive publicity and public outrage the crime had caused in Ogden, the trial was moved to next-door Davis County in the town of Framingham. The trial began on October 15, 1974, and ended a month later on November 16th, with the convictions of all three men. William Andrews, who was described as the brains of the operation and the driving force behind everything that happened that night, was convicted of first-degree murder and robbery. So too was Dale Pierre, who was described as the gang's enforcer. He pulled the trigger and raped one of the women. Keith Roberts was lucky to only be convicted of robbery, as he hadn't entered the building that night and had not left the van. 4 days after they were convicted, both William Andrews and Dale Pierre were sentenced to death by lethal injection. Keith Roberts was given a custodial sentence of 5 years to life, dependent on his behavior. Andrews and Pierre, they actually got 3 death sentences, one for each victim. So sentenced to death 3 times.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What they did was so goddamn horrific. Yeah. And he can't be that stuff, man. Oh, this whole story is infuriating.
It's so unnecessary. I don't know. They were planning to kill someone.
Yeah.
Someone was going to die. I think that's what it was all about. Let's go kill someone, and why not make a bit of money while we're doing it?
Yeah.
They chose Drano. They wanted to inflict as much pain as they could. It was, horrific.
Yeah. Orrin Walker survived, and after he testified against the men who killed his son, he lived until April 22nd, 2000, when he passed away at age 69. Courtney Naisbitt managed to overcome his injuries as well as the death of his mother, Carol, and even returned to high school and ultimately graduated with his class in 1976. Sadly, he was unable to hold down a steady job and had to rely on Social Security aid for the rest of his life. Courtney died 2 years after Orrin Walker on June 4th, 2002, at just 44 years old and having suffered chronic pain ever since the assault that night in 1974. Dale Pierre finally went to the executioner's office on August 28, 1987, aged 34. although he did so as Pierre Dale Shelby, having changed his name while on death row. It was actually the 27th time he changed his name, something he claimed was to try and protect his family from his murderous notoriety. That's why he did it 27 times. Right. I like how he did it on death row as well, just one last time. Maybe if I changed my name, they can't convict me.
Oh, you're not meant to be in here.
Yeah. At his clemency hearing, Delpierre told the panel that, quote, "The crime took a course of its own. It wasn't planned that way. People kept coming in and I just panicked. The only way to prevent what happened was to have been moved away from the Air Force entirely." Unquote. No, the only way to prevent what happened was for you not to fucking do it.
Right, I know. Yeah.
Pierre went on to blame an excessive amount of drink and drugs for his actions that night. However, Delpierre, being drunken on drugs, those claims have been refuted by his own accomplice, William Andrews, who said he had never once seen Delpierre drink alcohol, let alone do any hard drugs. Warren Walker also testified at Delpierre's clemency hearing, where he called Delpierre a sadist and said that Pierre deserved to die. Oren told the clemency board that after Pierre fatally shot Carol Naisbitt in the back of the head, Oren saw him smile and almost begin to dance as he walked away. It was clear to Oren Walker that Delpierre was enjoying what he was doing. His only regret was for himself. Oren also spoke about the long-lasting effects the night had on his wife and his surviving son, the ones who actually discovered the carnage that night. His son was so traumatized he refused to go into the basement of their own home and had to sleep in his parents' room.
Yeah, definitely I'm in with Oren on this one. Some people just don't deserve to be in society anymore.
For sure. Co-signed that to the fullest extent, my man.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about Andrews, but Pierre, he was definitely planning on killing that night, and 100%, we mentioned before, he would have killed it again if he'd gotten away with it, but I don't think there was anyone in Ogden who was sad to see Pierre put to death either. So the night before his execution, there were some bars around the area and they held a going away party. They even had cake.
Nice. That's good. Pierre was put to death via lethal injection after his appeal for clemency was refused. His last words were, "Thank you, I'm just going to say my prayers," followed by, "I'll be glad when this is over." I mean, he's going straight to HE double hockey sticks, so let's say be glad for that, Bob. Keith Roberts, the driver, he was paroled, having served 13 years in prison. Upon his release, he moved to Chandler, Oklahoma, to be near family. He also, somewhat ironically, got a job through his parole board working at an electronics store in Oklahoma City.
Pierre was the first person to be executed by lethal injection in Utah. So up to that point, they were still using the firing squad.
Damn.
His last meal was steak and lobster, and he watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
That's your last. That would be what you would do.
He might be a piece of shit, but he's got taste.
Next up to the needle was William Andrews. Andrews' death sentence was controversial given he didn't directly kill anyone. Despite his original execution date being pushed back from the slated August 22nd, 1989, after he was given a stay by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, that wasn't a good enough excuse in the end, and though he managed to delay his execution by another 5 years compared to Pierre, lasting until July 30th, 1992, having exhausted his appeal options, he would finally face the old nick in the side. Shortly before his execution, Andrews confirmed an earlier statement by Detective White, in which the detective had alleged that Andrews planned the robbery after becoming friendly with Stanley Walker. He also again blamed the extreme and excessive amount of violence solely on Pierre, and said that he hadn't intended to kill anyone. His last meal was a banana split that he shared with his sister and her daughter. His last words were, "Thank those who tried so hard to keep me alive. I hope they continue to fight for equal justice after I'm gone. Tell my family goodbye and I love them," followed by, "I love you, bye-bye." Less than a week after Andrews' execution on August 8th, 1992, Keith Roberts, the getaway driver, committed suicide. Detective White, who had led the earlier investigation, was honored by the Utah Justice Department for his actions and the use of proactive techniques which helped to flush out the killers. And Shanae. That is the story of the Ogden Hi-Fi murders. It's, it's a story where nobody wins. I mean, all three of the people who were behind it are dead. 2 by execution, 1 by self-execution. The police did believe that there was actually other people involved, but there was just never enough to arrest them or, charge them with anything. So who knows? Because there was 2 vans, you know,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
It's kind of hard to. I'm not sure if there was more people involved because I feel it was again that gave up. Remember, he
That's a
testified
good
against
point,
Pierre.
actually. You'd think that they would have named more people.
If he didn't have anything to give, I'm kind of guessing that there was no one else there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Fair enough, Keith. You got me there. Fine. All right.
That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah. I'll just go and think of more of my movies. I'll watch more of my movies in my head. That's how I have a good time. Don't have to listen to you. All right. So there you go. Final thoughts on the Ogden Hi-Fi murders. What say you?
Definitely a sad one. I know we've talked about it before. I'm always like flip-flopping about the death penalty, but I know it's hard to feel a bit sympathetic in this one.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I fully agree. I flip-flop too about it, but then you hear about stories like this and what they did to the victims, and you're like,
Fuck 'em.
fuck 'em. Yeah, exactly. You know, they're irredeemable after what they did. But okay, well, there you go. Keith, final thought. Controversial as always, Keith. But there you go. All right. Thank you so
keep
much.
people on their toes.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, what are you going to say next?
Who knows?
Who knows? He's going to get a podcast cancelled. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Appreciate each and every one of you. You got a little space in my heart. Keith's he's kissing the microphone now. He's imagining it's you. All right, next podcast episode will be out, you know, when it's out. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you can. Helps us out tremendously.
It does.
I mean, I think so. People say it does. I have no idea how podcasts really work, Keith. I just talk into the microphone and hope people are listening.
People listen to this? Oh my god.
Delete it all. All right, folks. Till we see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.
And I'll see you.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.